Hi, everyone. My name is Erik D'Souza, and today joining me is three authors, all from the city of Calgary. We're starting a new playlist. Right now, it's temporarily called Alberta Sunshine because an interesting fact, apparently the sun shines a lot on Calgary. And I've got three authors with me today who are going to talk about the city of Calgary, why it's such a great place to both live, write, and also to set our stories into Calgary. I didn't do enough prep as I should have. So I'm going to have my authors introduce themselves. On my screen, Neil, you're on the top. So could you introduce yourself, Neil?
Yeah, hello. My name's Niall Howell. So I'm a born and raised Calgarian author. I have two novels out. My first novel, which conveniently I have both of them right here, but my first one was called Only Pretty Damned, put out by New West Press in 2019. And the one that just came out recently, There Are Wolves Here Too. This also came out in by New West Press, and that came out just this past September, so September 2022. Both of them have Calgarian elements in them as well. So, born and raised Calgarian, those books, I'm an absolute authority on the subject here. You can trust me.
Excellent. Susan, would you like to say hi?
Sure. Hi, my name is Susan Calder. I was born and raised in Montreal, and I lived there till about 27 years ago, and then I moved to Calgary. So I have a little comparison there. I have a murder mystery series that's set in Calgary. I've published three books in it already with BWL Publishing, who are based in Airdrie, and I also have a standalone mystery suspense novel that's set in Calgary in California. And I've written short stories and volunteer in different activities and groups in Calgary.
Excellent. Thank you. And Julie, would you like to say hi?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Julie Hiner. I write heavy metal horror. So it's psychological suspense. It is detective versus serial killer. So it crosses that nice line between horror and crime. So I kind of fit into both. I do have a trilogy out, and it's all set in the 80s. It's all set in Calgary. I was born and raised here as well. Also have a couple novella offshoots from that series, and the fourth book is coming in April. I've also written pure horror too, so I have a bunch of short stories and co-curated an anthology actually with somebody in the UK. So I'm touching both realms here.
Excellent. Thank you. I've had the pleasure of interviewing all of you before. And actually, Susan and I were talking, and she was opening my eyes a little bit to the Calgary scene. And I realized that I had a lot of preconceptions about Calgary, and I was completely wrong about the city. And I'm imagining I'm not alone. For Canadians, we think, we think oil and gas. Right off the bat, I know you guys don't pay provincial tax, but I think the Stampede, I think Cowtown, obviously the Flames, but I don't really have a solid grasp of Calgary. So the first thing I did before starting this, or coming up with ideas for this program, I looked up some interesting facts about Calgary. And at first I was on the Calgary website and I was like, really? I don't really believe that. But I went from other sources and found out like, oh, wow, I have a very misconception view of Calgary, and it's not the town I think it is. So I thought what I would do is read 9 different facts, and I get you guys to fact check them and tell me if these websites are wrong or if Calgary really is what it says it is. Neil, I'll start with you. On the website, I found it's one of the youngest cities per capita in Canada. I read one that said it was 37 years was the median age, one was 36, so I'm guessing it's pretty close to that. Does that feel right to you?
Yeah, as a 37-year-old, that feels very right to me. And I'm just glad that that's our metric for young. So 37 is young. I'm a happy camper. And next year, 38 is going to be the new 37 soon, I feel, though. But I can verify that fact for sure.
So that takes like a lot of young families, I'm assuming, then in Calgary?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like there's lots of young families. I mean, it's so different from quadrant to quadrant, but in my experience, yes.
I also read, Julie, that it's a very diverse city. So 2 numbers that came out is 25% of your population is foreign born, and you have 120 languages spoken. Obviously, it's something you think about Toronto or Montreal, Vancouver, but apparently Calgary too.
I would believe that. Again, growing up here, going to school here, I've always felt like it was quite multicultural, and that just seems normal to me. And even looking at, as Neil mentioned, the different quadrants, there are some. I mean, we've got a Chinatown, we've got more Asian areas, we've got like it's just it is very diverse. I would definitely agree with that.
On the Calgary website, it claims to be the cleanest city in the world, Susan. On the Canadian side, it did say you are known for being a very clean city, also a very livable city with clean drinking water and, well, obviously the mountains and everything. So is it a clean city, though?
Well, that's really hard to judge. I maybe haven't been to enough cities, but I'd say there's maybe relatively little pollution here, like having grown up in Montreal and places like that, because I don't think we have a lot of heavy industry and things like that. So I would say, in that sense, it would be pretty clean. I think people do have a respect for the environment in the sense that they like to go out to the mountains and all that. So they don't tend to throw a lot of garbage and stuff that outside. Like I do a hike up once a year in the Rockies nearby, and it's really hard to find garbage, that so perhaps in that sense we are a clean city.
Yeah, that's excellent. Because I mean, I'm in BC, and a lot of times when we go hiking, I do see garbage. So I've never heard that about the Rockies. So that's really good to hear.
Yeah.
It's not on this list, so I'm going to ask all of you before I go back to it. But I heard a lot of bike lanes, that it's a very bike and pedestrian city. So that's another
Yeah, we have a lot of bike paths. We do have a lot of bike paths. They are, but here it's like shared between walking and biking. So there's not a lot of just dedicated biking, but we have hundreds of kilometers of bike paths through the city. It's really good, actually.
Yeah.
And they're often, I'm just gonna say they're often very uncrowded too. Like it's not like you're packed people where you can be in some places.
Yeah, I guess another fact, I heard 1.4 million, which kind of puts you in the middle of like city-wide size. I mean, it's still a big number, but it's not like Toronto or Vancouver, Montreal, where you've got 4 or 5 million people living on top of each other. 1.4 seems to be a nice sort of middle number where you could still be a city, but you're not completely overcrowded. One thing that wasn't surprising is per capita, I read you have the most millionaires. Neil, does that sound right?
Speaking as a non-millionaire, yeah, that does sound right. I think just given the industry here, and I'm sure that those of us who live here as well can think of certain areas where you have these just monolithic mansions. But yeah, seems like there are plenty of millionaires here.
Julie, I was a little surprised about this, but apparently you have a vibrant theater scene, a very good music scene. My preconception is like, sure, there's a lot of cowboy bars, but apparently there's more than cowboy bars in Calgary.
Yeah, definitely. Even at the Calgary Stampede, they do bring in concerts every year, and it's not just country music. So yes, there's a lot of country, but the music scene is very diverse. I go to a lot of live music. We have some really nice little and large venues. We bring in a lot of bands. We support local bands. I go to jazz, blues, metal, heavy metal, rock. It's every weekend there is something going on, and it isn't just country. It is quite diverse for sure.
I was surprised to read this, Susan, but I know you do a lot of volunteering, and apparently you're not alone. That Calgarians tend to be very community oriented and volunteer for a lot of events or a lot of different things.
Yeah, I think that's true. And coming from Montreal, I found that quite remarkable. And I think part of it is that a lot of people historically have come here from other places. Not Julie and Neil, apparently, but a lot of people are. So you don't necessarily have your family group with you, and you're looking for things to do and people to meet. And so I think that's one reason why it may have this strong volunteer commission, tradition. And organizations like businesses really promote it too. And a lot of business people are encouraged to volunteer for the Stampede and things like that. So I think that's very much true.
Excellent. Now this is one I was very surprised about, Neil, because can't talk about Calgary and not the weather. I think of harsh winters, but apparently you have the most sunniest days of any major city in Canada. The number they're putting out is 333, which seems like a lot. Is Calgary a sunny city?
To me, I feel like when you live here long enough, you become sort of accustomed and then thereby oblivious to things like that. So I feel like it's just status quo, but then I realize it when I go to Vancouver, for example, or you find yourself in another city. So I feel like that's a certified grade A fact that we can give the seal of approval to. But if anyone else wants to weigh in on that one, I just drove from the north, and on Stony Trail this time of the day, I was blinded by sun half the drive home. So I say yes, but if anyone wants to say otherwise, go for it. Yeah, we're saying it's.
I think in Vancouver we're the opposite. like it's not cold.
Yeah.
But it's sometimes we can go a month without seeing the sun, and then when it comes out, you're like, what is that?
Oh boy.
And it's not for everyone, but yeah, my wife's from Winnipeg. She tells me this sort of the same thing. That it's similar. It's cold. It's snowy. There's a lot of snow on the ground, but the sun is out, and it's beautiful. Is Calgary too?
Yeah, but we don't have a lot of snow, really, I don't think. Not compared to Eastern Canada or even, Winnipeg and places like that, usually.
All right. Julie, I know I brought this up and I saw a smile on your face. Apparently, you have a lot of restaurants, over 5,000 restaurants, and what you want to discuss is breweries, that you have a very vibrant craft beer scene.
We do. So I think you mentioned there's like 50 breweries, but I know we've got a good dozen to 2 dozen craft breweries and some really good ones, some award-winning ones. We have one that's actually got a very high-end barrel-aged program that we go to all the time. And so, yeah, it's exciting for people like my husband and I who really are passionate about craft beer. And when we have traveled to other places, we think, oh, wish we had this. Well, you know what? We're catching up. We've got quite a craft beer scene.
And I'm going to assume that most people watching this are readers and writers. And one thing that's important to us is libraries. And Susan, from what I read, you have a beautiful new library.
We do. Our downtown library is beautiful architecturally. And really, I'd say anybody who visits Calgary, it's really worth a tour. Like, it's a tourist attraction, and they do give tours that you can sign up for. So it's that building in itself is a lovely one. And then we have libraries scattered over the different neighborhoods, and membership is free for residents. Maybe, I don't know if that's common in other cities, but it's fairly new for us. So yeah, our library is a big plus for the city.
Excellent. So I think we've set the stage that Calgary isn't what people might think it is. But you made it sound so pleasant. And maybe, Julie, you could start with answering this. Why is Calgary a place where you like to set your gruesome mysteries?
Well, for me, there's a couple of things I can say here. Is my core series is set in the 80s. And of course, growing up here, I just have so many good memories about the 80s. And when you know a place and you love a place, you just have this inclination, I think, to write about being in that place. But also, like, from a crime perspective, I spent a lot of time hiking and biking. And honestly, Calgary has so many, not just bike paths, but trails and forests and big green spaces. And there's some really good settings. I like to juxtapose like the beautiful park with the dark murder mystery. And also, because I write about serial killers and my favorite eras were the 70s and 80s, I kind of mimic the Ted Bundys of the world and people like that who leveraged big open spaces to hide bodies and such. So we actually do have a lot of places you can use here to inspire you if you're writing dark crime novels.
Susan, your stories are also in Calgary. I don't think as gruesome, but
no, not as gruesome. That's a good point about the nature being good places to hide people. And we do have a closeness to nature with all our parks and with our mountains nearby. I guess I relate to it because being a person who moved here, I was very aware when I moved here that a lot of people were newcomers here at different times, especially the boom times, whenever there's a boom time. And Calgary has a long tradition of booms, bust too, but booms, and people have moved here. And I think I feel what I like about that mystery aspect is people can hide secrets a lot better when you come to a place and you're not known, and you've got a past that you're not sharing with other people. So I feel it works that way for me, of being a place that people can come and be unknown and have a secret past that becomes uncovered in the story.
I think we lost Erik's voice.
Yes,
Am I back?
Yes.
Sorry, that was me.
yeah,
Neil,
good. I'm glad it wasn't me. Yeah.
Neil, in your case, at least in your most recent book, your story takes place in the suburbs. Sometimes we can interchange suburb for suburb, but is the Calgary suburbs different?
Yeah, I think so. And I set it in a suburb outside of Calgary, really just so I could take pieces of Calgary and sort of amalgamate it into this one sort of setting where I kind of got to play God and write with a little bit of whatever I wanted about Calgary. So even though it is a suburb of Calgary, I was sort of taking, I'm going to name drop a bunch of Calgary locations now, but like Strathcona Ravine, Arcade from Eau Claire Mall in the 1990s. And I was sort of just picking and choosing elements of the Calgary that I grew up in. But I'm not sure if it's any more or less different from other suburbs. I think it is just very much like to Julie's point about how when you grow up in a space, you feel this inclination sometimes to set your work there. And I think that with crime fiction, it's sort of like Calgary has its the sort of wonderful parts of it, but at the same time, if you stare at any area long enough, you can sort of imagine what that seedy underbelly looks like. Yeah.
Yeah. If I
Um,
could just add,
yep.
if you don't mind, on to because Neil just set me up perfectly, but like I use things like historic things like the Cecil, which was like, murder every night at the Cecil. And so it just fits with that. If you're writing gritty or dark or crime at all, that we had such great settings, especially in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and some of them still exist. And it just isn't it's not very hard to find something that can inspire you, whether you actually call it the same name or whatever. But yeah, we just had such great things. And we even had this thing called Electric Avenue that I'm using in my next book. And it's just like it was this massive kind of mini Vegas over 4 blocks. And for a while it was crazy. And so what a setting for, I don't know, even if it's not murder, what a setting for something really exciting, very vibrant, but had that underbelly at the same time.
Yeah, a lot of those, if I could just jump back in again,
Yeah.
a lot of those places downtown, you walk by them at night and they just have this very cinematic look to them. And yeah, the Cecil, Fourth Avenue flyover, but they look like the perfect area to stage something like that. So I think that's part of the charm of the city for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
I know Anthony Bedelka, who lives in Saskatchewan, often says that people try to discourage him from setting his stories in Regina. Have you felt that? I think your publishers are from Alberta, right? But do you feel like if you were, let's say, trying to go to Dundurn or an American publisher, do you think they would try to switch you out of your setting and say, please set it in Toronto or New York, or are your stories like inherently Calgary stories? Sorry, that's a toss-up. So
Yeah, I can't really, well, for me, I self-published my core series. So the stories I have had published weren't necessarily set here. But yeah, for me, I don't know if that would happen or not, because I did go down that route. But when I did set a book in Toronto and somebody who grew up there read it, he was pretty excited to be able to relate to these places. So it would be really hard for me to change it. But maybe you guys, maybe Neil and Susan know if there would be pressure from a publisher. I wouldn't know.
I don't know. I find that question always comes up at writing conferences and things. And the party line, the answer from publishers is always no, it doesn't matter. Set your story anywhere and it'll work. And that does seem to work in some level. Like you take someone like Louise Penny, who's read widely and sets it in this little village in Quebec. And we think of other foreign writers like Henning Mankell, who set it in this little Swedish village, and they're sold around the world. So I don't see why it should, because a lot of these stories have been really successful. But then you get other people who anecdotally say they have been told this. And I did consider it, like when I had my first novel and I went through pretty much sent it to every publisher in Canada, and I thought, well, should I set it in the States and try American publishers? And I went far enough to think about it, and I thought, I would try to pick a similar type city, maybe one that had oil, or one that was like Colorado, or one like Colorado that was in the mountains. It wouldn't be the same for me, and I wouldn't want to do it, but maybe it would be necessary. Maybe it wasn't a good idea to set it in Canada or in Calgary, but I did.
Yeah, it's hard to know whether that's an issue or not, but it's difficult to I can't imagine writing something that has just sort of a blank slate city that I could make interchangeable with anywhere, because in my limited experience with the two books I have out, the setting becomes such an integral part of the story, whether you intend it to or not. So I think it really becomes something that is right at the heart of the story, and it's not just sort of like okay, let's take this and now we can set it in space all of a sudden. So yeah.
Susan, BWL, is that Calgary based? Your publisher?
They're in Airdrie, actually, which is
Okay,
just
yeah, sorry, you did say that. Yeah.
just
So,
north of Calgary. Yeah.
so Neil, you're with New West. So to the both of you, you obviously have Alberta publishers. Do you find that there's enough Alberta publishers, or like did you even look outside of Alberta when you look for publishing, or you were like, no, an Alberta publisher is what I want?
Oh, totally. I looked outside. Yeah, there's really not a lot of Alberta publishers. I don't think. I think it's still fairly Toronto centric for publishing, with some publishers around in a lot of the other major centers. But I was looking outside for sure. I wasn't particularly looking for Alberta ones, although it's really great to have one.
Yeah, same here. I think Toronto is the big dog, and then Vancouver certainly has a lot. BC has quite a lot, but Alberta doesn't have a ton. I know that New West, which is based out of Edmonton, focuses primarily on Western Canadian authors. So I know you've spoken to Crime Writers of Canada members too, like AJ, JT Siemens, who are also with New West. But yeah, I felt just lucky to have landed a book with them.
And Julie, I self-publish like you do. And so we both know that self-publishing, even though it says self, you have to get other people to help you, hiring editors and graphic designers and stuff like that. Are you able, when you're hiring contractors, are you able to find them in your city, or do you go outside of it to get help?
A combination. So my editor, who's now become my editor of all my work, she does live here, and I met her at a local horror con actually, and she's kind of a specialist in the psychological and the crime, and yeah, so it was a perfect match. That was kind of serendipitous, and actually she does edit a lot of books for a lot of Calgary authors. But the graphic design, so I actually do a lot of my own covers, and when I don't, I didn't go local. I found something online, and I asked for advice from other people I trust, and I went with somebody, and it's I don't know where they're actually located, but they service everywhere and they do a great job. But as for, I do have some stories published, but they're not here. They're published, a couple were published by anthologies in the UK. Oh, sorry. No, I do have one published by a local publishing company called The Seventh Terrace, but they're a little more pure horror, which is probably why it hasn't really come up in the crime circle. Although they have published, like Brent Nichols comes to mind. He did a crime book, End of the Loop. So just to mention a couple, but they have published a couple crimes. So yeah, there are some good local ones as well. But yeah, hiring contractors, I tried to do probably too much on my own at first, but as I ventured out to find services, I tend to ask people I know and trust, and then I do my own comparison and I go with it. And I guess I haven't really been too concerned with whether it's been local or not, because a lot of these services like editing and graphic design and that, I mean, you don't have to be local to have a really good process and be involved, given now that we have this completely online world. So
yeah. Yeah, it's great that they have an online world, and I feel the same way. My graphic designer is in Nova Scotia. What about the literary scene? So when the book's done and it's ready and you want to do a book launch, are there independent bookstores that support you guys? Are there events that you can do readings in? Susan, do you want to start then?
Sure. Yeah, we have at least two great independent bookstores that are very supportive of writers, Owl's Nest and Shelf Life. And a lot of readings take place in those ones. And really, if you want to have a book launch, you can just contact them and they'll be glad to host you. And they put on other readings too. So I'd say most people go through them one way or another, although not necessarily do the reading at their stores. They might do it at another place, but the bookseller will come and sell the books to them. So there's really a lot of support there in those two places.
We also have AWCS, which is the Alexandra Writing Center, and they do give you a free space called the Treehouse that you can use to do a book launch. I actually just went to one there a couple weeks ago, and again, you can have Owl's Nest come and do the selling for you if you're not comfortable doing that, or if you want a bookstore representation. But because it's a volunteer-driven writing center that services all of us, they are more than happy to let you use space there and have like a small, medium, big party, whatever. They just love to support local writers. And then I have to add that going outside of the bookstores and writing centers, because I actually throw a live band 80s metal party for all of my core books, because they are a fusion of music and storytelling. And I'll tell you, the local venues, the music venues, the pubs, the whatever you want, they're very supportive of these types of events. And I always seek, and I'm hiring a band and I need a space for them to have sound and stage and everything. And I always seek something where there isn't some big commitment of upfront cost and stuff like that. And there are a lot of places that love to support local artists, whether they be musicians, artists, writers, and you can partner with them to have your book launch or your book event if you want to. It's a really good scene and it's very supportive.
Yeah, I found that too with not just the bookstores and bars, but everywhere seems to have this mentality of let's make it happen. I think that because so much of the city's art scene, maybe this is my interpretation, but I think a lot of it exists in opposition to kind of a larger culture at times. So the people who are they're running the stores and they're putting on these shows, they really just want to make everything work. Like I've done readings at the indie bookstores, but then there's been breweries that have had me before as well, and all these venues have just been really accommodating. There's a brewery, New Level Brewery, did a beer for my first book, which was cool. So I've had nothing but positive experiences with that stuff here.
Another thing, when I think Calgary, I think when words collide. And Susan, I know you've been a big part of that in the past, and I know there's a live event happening this summer. Did you want to speak to that a bit?
Yeah, sure. Well, I've been every year to When Words Collide since it started, which might be like 13 years ago. They were 3 years online for the past 3 years, and I'd still participated, but not as much. And then I was on the board and doing some of the organizing, especially for panels and things. And it was really a vibrant festival. I felt that the prime focus drivers were the science fiction and fantasy people, and they know all about costumes and how to really have a good convention that way, and really set a really energetic tone. And unfortunately, this summer will be the last year of it. I think COVID did it in a little bit, and it's run its course, and the main organizers are getting older. But it's been a really good place, and it was really inexpensive. And I made some good contacts there.
Neil or Julie, have you ever been to the event?
Oh yeah, I haven't gone as many years as Susan, but years ago I had written this nonfiction book, and so I had written it, I had it edited, and then I had no idea how to make a book. And somebody, I was buying her book at this bookstore, and I asked her, and she said, go to this thing. And I went, and I was like, oh my gosh. So that first year I went, I just completely plunged into all the sessions on self-publishing and cover design, and it was fantastic. And then I just went every year after, and I was a presenter. I did help organize panels. I loved the Noir at the bar that they used to have, and even through the last few years, I did some presentations online to kind of help keep it going, because they were trying to keep the program going in the virtual environment. So it's really exciting that it's coming back, and it is too bad that it won't continue. But I think if there were people that could step up and do it, although that, you know, the people running it have done so much work, and it is a lot of work, and it is volunteer driven. But I learned so many things, including that's where I met the detective that I've been interviewing for years, because he did presentations there, and I approached him. And so I think a lot of what I learned about writing and how to make books, and a lot of the community I have, that's where it all came from. So it's been very important to me.
Neil, do you ever go?
No, I haven't actually attended. I didn't know what it was until a couple of years ago. And when shortly after my first book came out was our COVID year. So that was the first time they were doing it online, and that was when it landed on my radar. So I'm attending this year. But it's awesome that we have it here, and unfortunate that it's coming to an end.
One thing I learned recently from Susan, in fact, was that you're getting Bouchercon coming 2026. I know you're a part of it, so I hope you don't mind if I start with you again, Susan.
Yeah, sure. Well, that's pretty exciting. It's actually a Tourism Calgary initiative, and they made the contact with the Bouchercon first people. And the only time it's the largest mystery writing convention in North America, basically, and it usually takes place in the States. This will be the 5th time it's been in Canada, and it's only been in Toronto before. And this is an attitude of Calgary, typically Calgary. It's like, well, if Toronto can do it, we can do it. You know, Calgary figures they're the big guys, they can do it. And because it really is quite a big enterprise for Calgary to take on. And anyway, they wound up finding me on the internet, and long story short, I ended up being the co-chair of it with a friend of mine, and we're putting together a volunteer team, and it's quite a fascinating learning curve. Expect the majority that coming will be more Americans than Canadians, and from Tourism Calgary's perspective, it's a issue of getting people to Calgary and finding out about us and everything like that. So one little thing I'll say is we've got the good volunteer base here. That's one reason why Calgary did get the bid. That they put out a call for volunteers and got a lot of interest. So that's another typically Calgary thing too, I find. And we could still use volunteers. So if anybody's in Crime Writers of Canada and would like to be part of it, they should get in touch. They could probably find me. And there's a lot of things that can be done remotely, like working on the program or registration and things like that. And that would be great. So it'll be in 2026, and it'll be here.
Have you lined up any guests yet?
We have. So we have Louise Penny as she's going to get a Lifetime Achievement guest. We've lined up Canadian guests. And then we have PJ Vernon, who's the local. I don't know if you guys know him. He writes pretty heavy stuff. And he's got the role of Toastmaster. Each guest has an extra title. And another Canadian author we've lined up is Jennifer Hillier, who writes a lot of thriller kind of stuff too. And we've put out feelers to other people too that we're waiting for, and we've been turned down by some pretty big names, such as Stephen King. We
might as well try.
We thought we'd try, and it was briefly exciting to think he might be here, but he said, but no, thank you. But so we're trying to dream a little bit big, and we'll see how that goes. And we've got about another 4 or so to line up.
Well, maybe I can get you 2 more volunteers. Neil, Julie.
Yeah.
Can I volunteer can I be the guy who drives Louise Penny around? I'll take her to Diner Deluxe. We'll go do Kensington in all its glory.
Yeah, you might have to compete with a few people for that one, but we'll put you on the list.
I have a valid Class 5 driver's license. What other credential could I possibly have?
Okay, we'll think of that one.
She wants to go dancing. I'm your girl.
Okay, I'll drop her off.
The music scene, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You can take her to the music and the brewery scene, right?
Right.
Is there anything else happening in Calgary?
Yes, from a crime writer's perspective, we do have a Noir at the Bar that's going to be going on April 5th. So I am actually in the role of Alberta rep, and feeling my way in, trying to do what I can. But the good thing is we did have like an in-person event in the fall, and it went really well, and people really enjoyed it. So we are doing this on April 5th. I'm just securing the venue, but we're going to have special guest Detective Dave Sweet's going to come and read from his book. Owl's Nest will be there to sell the books, and we've already got about 8 people signed up to read and sell books. So it's just a great opportunity for our local crime writer members in Calgary to actually share their work and get some exposure and get some practice coming out and reading. Because I know for me, it was terrifying when I started doing it. So I believe Neil signed up. I think Susan signed up, but if anybody else, it's going to be great. And so, that's coming up. And I think a good place to go to is the Owl's Nest website or the AWCS website, because they do post all of the upcoming launches and readings and open mic nights. They have an open mic night that they partner with. They partner with each other to host that at the Owl's Nest. So those are 2 good places to go to find out what's going on locally.
Neil, do you have anything coming up other than that one?
No, that was the big one on the radar right now, and then otherwise I'm just trying to chip away at my next book intermittently. So yes, looking forward to that one, though. It's awesome we're doing it. And may I suggest Louise Penny also for reading it more at the bar?
She's very noir.
And well, I want to keep doing them, but the idea is to have, like, if we have a special guest, that's great. But I am trying to focus on giving crime writer members an opportunity to come out of their shells and to read and practice. So it's a great idea, but I want to spread the special guests out because I want it to be a focus on our members. So, but maybe in the future.
I'll just add that Julie is our new CWC rep, and she's very dynamic, and putting these readings together and having meetings too, online meetings with people. So she's really infusing a lot of energy into our scene.
Thank you. I'm trying.
Yeah.
I know it's hard sometimes. I don't know if it's a COVID thing or not, but getting people out of their houses to go to these live events. It's great to get 6 speakers, but can you get a dozen, 20, 30 people to come out and buy your books and listen to you read? Yes,
we had probably a good 30 people at the last one. I'm actually doing my own book launch at the end of April, and I've already got a dozen people, and I've only been selling tickets for about a day. And they actually buy a book package before they come. So it's a live band, there's a venue. I'm supporting a local band, I'm supporting a local venue, and I'm bringing all these people out. And usually I get 60 to 80 people at those things. And I think a lot of the, open mic nights at the Owl's Nest, they get 30, 40, sometimes 50 people. I think for me, what it is getting people engaged ahead of time, keeping your list of people are interested in this and taking the time to reach out, but also leveraging the social media platforms. Like Crime Writers Canada does a great job, right? We're always seeing new releases, and we're always seeing events going on. And when you post those things and you keep posting them over and over, especially if you're partnering with a venue or something like the Owl's Nest, people see these things, and when they see them, they come. So it's really about reaching out to people, engaging people, and being really consistent with advertising these events. And in my experience, you can really do a good job at these things.
A lot of the venues also have really loyal clientele as well. So I've found it surprising too. And you have the people who come out to support you, which is awesome. But then like Shelf Life and Owl's Nest and all these places have people who just, if it's happening there, they show up, which I think is so cool.
Yeah, exactly. And they'll, like, if you do an event with Owl's Nest, we create a shared event on Facebook, and they share it on their social media. We share it on ours. So it's a partnership, and a lot of these venues, they're very supportive. The launch I'm having, I'm really excited because I finally got a really good music venue where they have bands all the time, and they have everything on their website and on their social media. And so if you support them, they're supporting you, and they're posting it. So if you're looking to do something and you want to partner with some kind of venue, like you said, Neil, even breweries and such, there's a lot of good venues that will help you promote that event, because you're bringing people in there. They want to help you to share and make sure that you do get a good turnout.
So what's your new book about, Julie?
It's number 4 in the 80s metal murder series, and it's in the late 90s. It's a lot of Rob Zombie. It's a lot of witchy murder scenes, and it's actually the daughter of the detective from the 80s. So we go ahead 10 years, and she is a fireball. So it's very Salem's Lot inspired, but it is like Criminal Minds, detective investigation. I think this one takes a bit of a supernatural spin as well, because it's called Devil's Track. And what happens is she ends up getting this album that's called The Devil's Track that's linked to the case, and she's trying to figure out who these murderers are. And it hypnotizes her. It's got a supernatural element to it.
You have tones of the supernatural, Neil, in there are wolves here too. Actually the question is, what are you working on next?
So I can only talk about it so much because I'm superstitious, but I'm chipping away at something. This would be the first thing I've written that is set entirely in Calgary. In both of my previous books, there's scenes that in chapters that take place in Calgary. There's things that are Calgary centric, but this is the first one that's set exclusively in Calgary. And it's a crime story that is it takes place in just after the 88 Winter Olympics, which was a very big thing that happened here. You might have heard of it. Yeah, so it just has to do with that. It has to do with kind of the sense of cultural identity. How is that shaped after we have this sort of larger event, after it comes here and there's this sort of large build up to it and then it's gone. So the things that are sort of left in the wake of that. And I am currently stumbling around in the darkness trying to find my way through that novel. But so far I'm pretty productive, but I also have a 1-year-old and then another baby showing up in like a few months here. So I'm just enjoying a few hours of sleep at a time while I have it. And yeah, it'll be done sometime. I'll have it done by Bouchercon. How about that?
Okay.
So me and Louise Penny can talk about it over breakfast.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Oh, you corrected me when I called it Bouchercon.
No, it's
Oh yeah.
I know. I'm
It's the French Canadian and I.
No, we've got to. I think at Bouchercon we'll have to make a lot of jokes about that. And, a little banter about the Canadian and the pronunciation and
that was the Albertan pronunciation as well.
Well,
you say Bouchercon and then you fire the gun in the air 5 times and that's it.
French is Bouchercon.
Yeah, Boucher, yes.
What I want to call it. Susan, are you working on anything?
I am, yeah. I'm at the editing phase of my 4th novel in my mystery series. So my sleuth is an insurance adjuster, and she gets involved in crime investigation that way, and it's pretty much on a whodunit kind of story. And so I set this one in spring 2020, right smack in the pandemic during the first set down. I just had an idea. I just felt like I wanted to process that experience, like maybe a couple of years afterwards, and what it was like in the lockdown. And I used to be able to write, and I also felt I didn't want to write a story a year or so ahead because I didn't know how much the world would change. So I knew what it was like then. So it was interesting. For me, it was an interesting experience just to recall that. And you actually have to remember what was shut down at different times and what people were exactly doing, because each phase of the pandemic was very different. But this was right in April 2020. So everything's locked down. My protagonist, Paula, has a partner, a live-in boyfriend, but he happened to be stranded over in Europe at the time. So they're separated that way. Her colleagues are all working from home. So she's decided to go into the office to work because in effect, it's like working from home. She lives near there anyway, because she's the only one in the building. And I've introduced a little possibility of a ghost in there, just to have slight supernatural hints that nice. We'll see how that goes. And anyway, so she's working from home. It's a question. There's a lot of people meeting on through Zoom and that kind of platform too. But I've worked it out that she does a lot of meetings in person too, because what the premise is, there's a burglary in a bike store, and that leads to the murder. And bicycle stores were open at that time because they were considered essential. They were defined as transportation, and they were considered essential. That surprised me that was true. And unlike restaurants and medical things and everything that was closed. And I happened to buy an ebook at that time, and we dealt with this local community bicycle store, which is kind of a quirky place. And so I'm using them, but relocating them in Calgary. And that's one of my primary settings. So it's been very interesting. And what I would say is, like, COVID and the pandemic and all the restrictions permeate the story so much that it would be impossible to take it out, because they just affect everything that happens, as they really did in our real life, right? And still do. So that's my story, and that'll be out in August or September.
I think it says a lot about Calgary that your bike stores are essential services.
Yeah.
Our liquor store was, but I don't know if our bike stores were.
I wonder if you should look that up. But yeah, our liquor stores were too, I'm sure.
Yeah, my wife, who doesn't drink, thought that was very funny that liquor stores
Yeah.
are essential services.
But that's when we needed the liquor.
It's true. So in some ways, I think all Canadian cities kept their liquor stores open. So we agree on something.
Yeah, that says something about us, doesn't it?
That's all the questions I had. Are any of the last comments? Then I think it's thank you time. So
well, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank you, Susan. This was your idea.
Well, I thought it was yours, but
it was during your interview, and it was just
it came up
wow,
during our interview. Yeah,
we should talk about Calgary, and I'm glad we did.
Yeah. Wow.
All right, and to everyone
And I
else
apologize
watching,
for all of that confusion. I misunderstood, I misunderstood what was going on, and I think I confused it more. But thank you, Erik, for figuring all that out.
It's always a challenge to get 4 people to sit down and have free time and actually talk about it. So I'm glad it happened.
And we're your first Canadian city that you've profiled, aren't we? Like actually giving attention to Calgary.
Essentially, yes. I interviewed Iona Wishaw, Dave Butler, and I just forgot her name.
Was it Amber Cowie?
Amber Cowie's Squamish, but we talked about the Kootenays.
That's right. So that was a region. Yeah.
So that was a region. So you're the first city.
Okay. Because Calgary likes to be special.
I was going to say the most Calgarian thing ever would be to let that go to our heads. Oh, first city. Yeah, that's
Totally.
right.
The first city profiled by Crime Writers of Canada.
Well,
Congratulations, Calgary.
We take it as our due, right? Like
oh yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, the follow-up to this will have to scratch the surface of Calgarian entitlement, but in a 1-hour discussion, there's hardly enough time to get into that.
Right.
But we definitely will. All right.
Yeah.
So thank you, all 3 of you, and thank you for everyone watching.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, take care.